Good morning. What I want to try and do is give you a quick example of how that DF software works and the super high speed at which it can work. Just a quick simulation. First of all, on the map, I've zoomed into this interesting country. I'm zooming down to this interesting border. What I have a receiver, maybe a DF system, whether it's fixed or it's mobile. It's here on this side of the border. What I'll do on this side is I'm just simply going to add a transmitter. Let's run that. The transmitter parameters, I can change the modulation type, frequency, power, bandwidth, and interestingly, the pulse transmission as well. So pulse off and on times I can control. I can also control frequency hopping patterns and rates. So what we'll do, let's just add an AOA processor for the moment. We're going to make it centered on 1 gig, which is where this is, 10 meg span. Oh, we'll just say yes, that'll do. And here what I'm going to do is just change my line of bearing to just a simple vector. Okay, good. So as you can see, with the AOA running, the line of bearing is there. It's pointing directly at my transmitter. The simulator is such that if I move my transmitter around, you see a little bit of averaging. The line of bearing reacquires onto the system. What I'll do is just look at my processing, let's change the response time so it's fast. And you'll see now as I move the transmitter, the line of bearing very rapidly reacquires to the target. Okay, now the other key thing is sweeping time with my AOA. Processing loops basically defines the dwell time per face of the antenna or each of the antenna elements. So at the moment it's looping at 16 times. I'm just going to make it once. And now I maximize the speed and responsivity of my unit. Of course, you're decreasing the dwell time. And of course, you increase a little bit of noise on the system. But as you can see, you've got your AOA working at its most responsive. Okay, just on displays, let's have a look at my AOA spectrum. Just show you what that looks like. And what I'll do as well as a spectrum, let's add the waterfall because that's usually very useful. Great. Okay. Probably the other thing I need to just change, yeah, the resolution bandwidth on automatic. Oh yeah, that's huge. Let's put that at 5 kilohertz. Let's give ourselves as much spectral resolution as we can. That's lovely. Yeah, make that a little bit bigger. So what we'll do now is let's go back to that transmitter setting. We've already got pulse transmission turned on. So let's see what the impact is. Let's turn that down to 10 microseconds. It's on for 10 microseconds and then it's off for 1 millisecond. So it's a very low duty cycle. And as you can see, the AOA line of bearing, even with that setting, it's pointing off in the right direction. If I move that around, you'll see that it's following it. But of course, there's quite a lot of noise that sits around the line of bearing. So the output's a little bit wobbly. You can go back to your AOA, processing, do something like a squelch, and just say ignore everything below a certain level, and only take data above a certain level, and therefore only take data from the live signal when it's there on screen. And you can see that's responding very quickly to the requirements. Now then, let's go back to the transmitter here. What we're going to do is let's start making this hop. So let's put 10 hopping channels on board. And you can actually see the energies coming up the spectrum in all sorts of different areas. It just chooses 10 channels and pops it across. I might need to just scroll out a little bit here so we can see all of that. Let me move that there for you. Okay, so it's hopping over a number of channels. Let's have a look. What other setting do I need to play with? Well, actually, I don't need to play with any other settings here. It's actually quite understandable right from the get-go. You can even see on the waterfall the power coming through. So there we go, running against the frequency hopping channel. Pulse on time is 10 microseconds, off time is a millisecond. And you can see we're working very strongly to be able to see it. The other thing that our customers really enjoy with the AOA capability is under displays, as well as just snapping a line of bearing directly onto the map. The other thing our customers really like is what we call a bearing waterfall. Every frequency in the AOA band that we're looking at produces a line of bearing. So every single frequency hopping channel that we're jumping onto, when the power is there, is actually producing a line of bearing towards the signal. So you can actually see a waterfall of bearings of each of the different frequency hopping channels. The reason that's interesting is what if we have more than one transmitter in this frequency range and they're frequency hopping across each other? Well, the beautiful thing with what you can do with this is you can actually unpick and look at all the different bearings that you're seeing and be able to unpick on a channel by channel which bearing they're coming from. So if you've got things which are kind of co-frequency but not co-time, they're not in the same frequency band at the same time, you can actually unpick and be able to see the difference of the bearing and the location of them from that. The other final thing that's really interesting to look at is the AOA polar chart. Here it is. And here what you're seeing is you're seeing all of the different bearings that the receiver is seeing, and then you see the mathematical output. So the big green arrow that you're seeing here is effectively the green arrow that we're getting at the line of bearing. So it's the mathematical computation. If we move our transmitter again, and you'll see we quickly reacquire to the signal. You can see that the colors are changing, obviously, because the bearing relative to 0 is changing. And you can also see how my vector analysis is also changing up here as well. Okay, so very, very sharp and hard example. Probably the next thing I'm going to do is go live on one of our instruments and show you what that looks like for real.